Hello, everyone. Let's begin the session. So today, as we go through a few elements of awareness and vision, that's something that I want to talk about. Before we actually get into that, let's just go through a few common situations that we come across. I mean, this is just to give an idea of what the session is tending towards. So we won't be talking much about the elements yet, but we'll just understand a few things that happens generally on the field. So this is one scenario, right? This is one example. You have a handler, you have a stack, a vertical stack, and you have a dump handler, right? Now, handler one is looking at the open area for a pass, and you have the cutter, the fifth cutter over here. In this particular case, you can have any cutter cutting, but in this particular case, let us say the fifth cutter is looking to come into that open space, so makes a deep cut and then comes in. Primarily to fake the defender. Now, quite often this is what we see, right? We see that someone is trying to make a cut, possibly even succeeds in making the cut inside. In this case, the fifth in the stack, and suddenly you have someone in the center. In this case, the third in the stack come in right with the defender without having looked behind, right? So the opportunity here is lost, and this happens way too often. You either have the third in the stack, or you have the first, or anyone for that matter, the head of the stack come in and stop that. So quite often you see that people don't watch their teammates enough. So this is one scenario that commonly occurs. Let's. This is another example. You have uh, handler one in a power position, looking to make a deep throw on the open side, and you have the cutter four who is trying to cut deep, and it quite often it's a simple pass. But also observe handler two in this case. Handler two has uh, in this particular case has left the defense behind, so is free for an upline cut. But you see them doing an upline cut, and one is not even aware that two is coming for an upline cut, because one is looking ahead into the area ahead to make a pass to one of the cutters possibly, and the pass might convert. I mean, the point over here is not whether one will pass it to two or not, but the point is that it might be a rush of a decision where two comes upline is open and you make a pass, but one would never have expected it, right? So uh, this is another example. You have uh, number two, the cutter number two is open, is poached, and you have one having a fairly easy pass, maybe an inside out pass, a forehand inside out to two, or maybe a hammer or something like that, right? So it, the chances of a conversion over there, one to two, is quite high. But quite often you see someone in the stack cut ahead. See, the point over here is not whether who cuts and uh, blocks the path. The point I'm making over here is these are scenarios that commonly occur where we lose a lot of opportunities because someone in between hasn't seen the bigger picture. Uh, this is another example that happens. One is in a power position, an easy pass to two, and there you go. Someone from the stack either thinks that he or she can cut better, or thinks that two uh, doesn't know how to catch the disc, or whatever the point is, right? Or has not seen two at all, and they make a cut right ahead, and either there's a turnover or the pass doesn't happen. So these are lots of opportunities that we miss, and when you look back at it, it is just about that one decision making that that could have uh, that could have led to completion. So these are scenarios that happen, and when you actually think about these scenarios, quite often it leads to the fact of whether you are aware of things that are going around, whether you are field aware, whether you have the vision to see what the overall picture is. So let's understand certain elements in uh, that make part of this awareness. And the elements that I share, I'll not be sharing all the elements today, because we will need a longer session for that, but I will share a few, and as we go we'll have more sessions on these, and these elements are in no particular order. Okay, so the first element that I want to talk about over here is when you talk about awareness, when you talk about vision, the first thing you talk about is the larger picture, right? You talk it's about seeing more than what maybe your tunnel vision is saying. Can you see where the space is? Can you see where people are cutting? Can you see where your teammates are? So let's understand this through a few examples. Yeah. So this is one example. The first thing that a lot of people say is see space. Can you see space when you have the disc? Can you see space when you're a cutter? Can you see space when you're a defender? Can you see? So let's just talk about space. So here you have the handler with the disc. Now this is this is roughly the space that the handler will be looking at, right? The point over here is if you're the handler, can you look at these spaces? Are you aware that there are these spaces available? Can you see these spaces? Uh, this is what the larger picture is. If you're just focusing on the stack and seeing whether someone is cutting, but you're not aware, maybe someone has gone to the break side, but you have a tunnel vision, you just don't see there. That's something that you want to overcome. So can you see space? That's what the larger picture is about. So you have the cutter cutting deep and then coming into that space, and then you look at it and you make a throw, right? Similarly, similarly in this particular case, say as a handler, you're looking at the last in the stack and you want to make a throw. As a person inside the stack, are you capable of seeing the space, and are you capable of saying, okay, I shouldn't get into the space with my defender because I know my teammate has a better chance at getting the disc. So it's not only about whether you're active or you're not active on the field. All the seven are active. You can either see space as a person who's actively involved in the play, or you can see space as in a way where you can create that for your teammates. So in this particular case, although the handler is passing to the fifth cutter, if the four in the stack remain where they are, they have done a successful job in actually seeing the space, right? Uh, Similarly, this is a host stack, a typical host stack. You have three handlers, you have four cutters, and you have four defenders. So can the handler or anyone in the offense for that matter see the space? The space is in these two horizontal portions, right? So can you see this? So when we talk about the larger picture, when you talk about Seymour, one of the primary things that any captain or coach would say is see the space available and see if you can make a throw into that space, which gives us a better opportunity for a completion, right? So that's what you begin with. Let's understand the larger picture through a few more examples beyond space. This is another example. Uh, this is the arrowhead that we spoke about last week when IP took the session. So you have uh, three defenders in the front. You have a short deep, two wing defenders, and a deep defender, and you have three handlers, 1, 2, and 3, and you have a vertical stack. In this case, let us assume the offense started with a vertical stack and the defense started with a zone defense, an arrowhead defense. Now idea the idea behind the zone is where the arrowhead wants the disc to be passed from 1 to 2 or 1 to 3 primarily to the sideline, and they can trap uh, the offense in that side, right? So they will possibly do this where you have one of the defenders mark, one defender poaching, and the other cutting out the dump pass. So just imagine you're in this space. Now if you look ahead, do you have options? No. I mean, you can always look at the far break side and say, yes, I can do a hammer, but the number of completions that a player generally gets is not high on that throw. And let's say it's windy, right? So you'll possibly look back and you'll see, okay, you have that space behind you, you have the space closer to the handler 3, and you have the break space. Now if you want to make a pass uh, towards your back to 1, quite possible, but there will be some pressure from the other defender, and so the defense is forcing you to make those longer passes, 1 either to 3 or on the break side where the defense can intercept the pass. Now so the point over here is, can you see the larger picture? Right now let's go back to the earlier formation. The formation is an arrowhead. You have two handlers, and you have the third handler, the uh, the break side or on the other side. Now, if two, the larger picture over here is, can two recognize that the arrowhead wants to trap you on the sideline, right? Now it's, and the arrowhead and the handler at number two actually decides, okay, let me go in, let me not be closer to the sideline and go in and collect the dust. So this can be a call either by, say, the handler number one or two. If handler two doesn't recognize it, maybe one can say, okay, why don't you come closer to the center and we'll pass the dust. So the chances of completion are a lot more, right? So this is the larger picture that you're talking about. Can you, as as a situation is developing, can you see it? You need not get the disc and the situation develop where you get trapped and you're stubborn about it, saying, yes, I have the throw, I know I can make the throw. The point is not whether you're good in your skills or whether you can make the throw. The point is whether you can take a smaller risk for a better opportunity. And in this case, if two might be the best handler, right, might be the best handler in ultimate, but the point is, does two have the awareness of saying, okay, let me not get trapped on the sideline and go inside and collect the dust. So this is the larger picture that that is always beneficial. This is another example. So in this case, we are taking the example of defense. So this is a cup that is formed. You have a hose stack. You have, in defense, you have a short deep. You have two wings. You have a deep deep. Uh, Now let's say one passes it to two, right, and one is trapped on the sideline. Now just observe the far defender marked in the box, right? Now in the earlier case, the far defender was in a good position because the defender had someone, an offense to mark in that zone. It's the wing, and in that zone they had one person. Now, as the disc is passed to the other handler on the sideline, typically the tendency of offense is to go towards the disc. So in the number four cutter in this case on the horizontal stack has come inside, right? So in now X is looking, the far defender is looking. There's no one behind, right? Now, are you in a position to see this? I often see that not many wing defenders do a good job at it. They don't know whom they're marking. Uh, all I mean, you can be stubborn and come out of the field and say, I was marking the wing. There was no one in that wing. What can I do? Right? But in this particular case, you would rather come inside, help the short mid, and possibly take the cutter four or the far handler, right? If you just come in, makes a big difference, right? Now just imagine this position. It makes a significant difference where two is all the more uh, tensed or stressed to make a pass ahead. The only option two has is one, right? No, so the point here is, can you make that switch? So let us assume in this case, two makes the pass to one, and then one has a free pass to three. In that case, the far defender who comes in will have to go back to their original position or somewhere close to that, assuming that the far cutter also goes back, right? So the point here is not which play is right or wrong. The point here is, are you capable of seeing as a defender what you're doing? As a defender, whether there is someone whom you're marking actively, or whether you can assist your teammate temporarily and do a better job at it, right? So so this is one of the elements that you have to develop as you play more and more. These are things that you have to look at. So let's just go further, but before that, so as you start playing more with this, I mean, quite often the question is, uh, people who don't recognize these things, the first question they ask is, where do I start? See, let's understand this kind of learning is not linear. It's not possible for us to say, okay, these are 100 situations, just by heart these 100 situations, and you'll be able to recognize that on the field and do it. It's not possible. This whole process of game awareness and vision is ambiguous, and you just have to start. Once you start beginning to think in that line, you don't even have to do it, but once you start beginning to think in that line, and once it starts becoming a habit, you'll be quite surprised by how answers start coming out. You'll be quite surprised by seeing that you automatically start understanding the situation better. And this is something that I think every player, be it experienced, be it people who are new, they have a lot to do in this, and it's always something that you have to develop, continuously learn on. So let's go into the next element that I have here. The next element is context, right? Context is primarily where, uh, say, you have two situations. Now, what you do in one situation might be right, but that same thing won't be applicable for another situation, and that's what context is. As you're doing things, right, you might make a in cut, you might make an out cut, but you can't continuously say what you're doing you can use it in every situation. So let's understand that by a few examples. So this is an example. This is a typical word stack. You have the handler, you have the fifth in the stack in this particular case who wants to cut in. Now, if if this person, the only intention is to go out and cut in always, right? And imagine suddenly the defense at the last minute changes. Earlier it was man defense, and once the stack is formed, if the defense goes into an arrowhead, as an example, now do you think uh, the same cut is applicable? Absolutely not. There's no chance that the handler is going to pass to the fifth cutter, right? Uh, so the if a player just has one kind of play, if the player fails to recognize what is happening on the field, the growth that the player will have, the fun that the player will have playing is very less, right? And also the team will not benefit at all. Now just imagine the same fifth cutter, instead of thinking like this, as soon as he or she found that there was a zone, thinks that okay, let's change the formation, and maybe calls out and says let us form a host stack, or let us say all the cutters in this particular case think about the same thing and recognize that there's a zone and say okay, let's do a different formation. And as they're doing the formation, the handlers can pass amongst themselves, right? They can still continue keeping the disk. Now, so they form a host stack, and the play continues. This is what we need, right? Quite often it happens that a captain or a coach on the line calls the line saying, okay, let's do a word stack. But you're quite unaware of what the defense will do, right? They might throw man, they might throw zone, and suddenly we realize that instead of throwing a man, they've thrown a zone. Can we adapt to it? That's the context, right? The context is, in this particular case, the fifth in the stack in a word stack would make a cut in, but can they use the same thing in another situation? Absolutely not. Maybe the cut is there, you might beat your defender, but it's just not applicable for all the situations. So you need to understand what context it is. You need to understand what situation you are in, and these situations happen on the fly. These situations happen as you're on the field. Let's take another example. Here you have a word stack, one looking ahead, uh, a simple pass. Now let's say the defense is really good. So one looks at two for uh, to make a pass, right? And two can get the disc anywhere in that zone that is shown. Now let's say uh, the mark on two is doing a blind mark, right? Is doing a blind mark. When I say blind mark, the mark on two just doesn't know where the disk is, but is doing a blind mark. So if two moves to the left, the mark moves to the left. If two moves to the right, the mark moves to the right. The defender moves to the right. So if two moves back, the defender moves back. So the defender is making it extremely hard for two to get the disc, right? And since the disc is close by, even if the defender is not watching the disc, when the disc is in the air and someone calls up, in all probability there is a chance that the defender gets the disc. Now say the defender is doing the same blind mark on the last cutter shown here by the number two, right? It's I don't think this will be successful. The amount of distance that the disc will be traveling is so much that if you do a blind mark and you're not aware of where the disc is, it's extremely easy for the offense to get it. They just need to do a fake, show the defender that if the offense is a smart player, then just show the defense that uh, that you're going to the break side, do one fake, the defense falls for it, and get an easy score. So the ideal position for the defender would be something like this, where the defender looks at where the disc is and the defense is aware of what is going to happen. So this is one more example of context. What you do use in one situation, using it in another situation, you will have to change the plan. Okay, it's 6:20 now. So we'll stop it here. There were a few elements that I wanted to continue with. But before we go into question and answer, just to give you an understanding, there are a lot more elements that will come in. Things like things about your competitor. Can you get into the head of your competitor? Things like odds. So here we've spoken about two situations and how doing the same thing in two situations may not lead you to do well. But in a particular situation, you might have multiple answers. So which answer gives you a better order of completion? So we'll talk about all these elements as we go further into the next few sessions. So we'll cap it up here. If any of you have anything you want to ask, please go ahead, and we'll talk further on this. Does anyone have anything it need not necessarily be questions, but even if you want to add something to this, or you want to say something about what you want to look at going ahead in terms of these sessions on field of vision. The idea over here is to make us aware of how we could move in this direction. So if there's anything you want to add also, please go ahead. The session is open for everyone right now.
Can I add something quickly, Vijay?
Yes, absolutely.
Okay. I just want to add my piece about how I see space and how I coach space. So one of the areas, when we're looking at areas, actually, can you go back to the first slide where the disk is in the center, the same vertical stack, disk in the center? Yeah. So the way that I like to think of space is in the numbers. So we always think of like the first cut being an undercut and an inside cut. So I call that 1A. And then you have the same open side deep. I call that 1B. And then this under break side you can look at, and I'll call that 2, and that's 2A. And then you also have this break side deep. You can do a big high floaty OI or a hammer. I'll call it 2B. And then people often forget to look at this space in the backfield here as like the dump space. And you can call this 3. So this is a good way to think about space on the field, where you see spaces like this. Like you can rotate between looking through these, and you might not always look at it in this order. You might, if you're stuck on the sideline, you might look at 3 straight away as your first option, not even bother looking upfield. If you're confident with your like flick IO break or high release, then or lefty throw right-hander, then you can look at 2A as the first option. Somebody's massively open, like one of the cutters is just sitting on the break side, then you might just look at that as your first option. But this is a good way to look at the field and think about these being the spaces that are available. This is how I often talk about space on the field.
Hey, this was wonderful, Jaideep. Vijay, can I add a thing or two as well?
Yeah, absolutely. Please go ahead.
Vijay, firstly, would you say that game sense and field of vision is the same?
No.
Okay.
I mean, they come in the same bracket of having a larger perspective.
Okay. No, the reason why I'm asking this, I think there was a lot of overlap between the two topics today. And I'm very happy that you touched base upon both the topics. Some of the examples that you were giving were a lot to do with game sense, especially say the fifth cutter being blind marked by the defender.
Right.
So that was not so much to do with vision as much as game sense. And I'm just bringing this topic up because I think both of them are interlinked in some manner. It helps a person who's got great vision and a good game sense, it aids to the team. But awareness versus decision making is what I wanted to point out. Being aware as to where the disk is or what your possibilities are versus decision making, which largely I feel is inclined towards the game sense part of it is where I wanted to kind of just ask a few questions. Like so say for example, like I wanted to present a scenario where a person is aware. You had one of those diagrams where there was a dump availability.
Okay.
Okay, the dump was labeled number 2, I think, and the dump was labeled number 2, and there were some downfield options for the cuts.
This one?
Yeah, we can take this one. Yeah.
Oh, okay.
So say for example, the fourth cutter is giving a cut, right? One is still aware about the fact that 2 has broken his defense, but is locked or has seen that fourth cutter has managed giving a free cut. Right now my point is being aware of the spaces, but then making a decision is also equally important. And in this case, if he decides to move ahead with the cutter, he gains more yardage versus maybe a safer pass as well. So I'm just saying, as in sometimes, you might be aware that there is an option, but you sometimes get locked onto a particular situation, right?
Absolutely.
After you've scanned it in your mind and you've decided to make a pass ahead.
Right.
For whatever reason, I mean, right? So I'm saying like, so game sense versus vision. I think there's like although they are two different topics to me, I think it's a balance that a player needs to probably seek to really excel. And one of those examples that you gave was that, how can when a person's being blind marked or face marked, like Jaideep mentioned, towards the farther side of the field, how can that person, the offense, be intelligent enough to take the defense away? To take them out of the way. So, these I think would be good examples to probably point out. I mean, if you're going to be talking about this topic in the upcoming talks as well, I think we can touch base upon game sense and field of vision, separately.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, there are a few more elements in my mind as well, some in those lines, like when I spoke about the earlier one, which was about odds, right? Like you said, within the same thing, there might be two things that you can do now, which is a better decision to take. So we will definitely be touching upon some of these in the sessions ahead.
Thanks, Vijay.
Cool, no problem.
Hi Vijay, one small clarification.
Yes, IP man.
Sorry, my video does not work. You went to that arrowhead, no? Can you just go back to that arrowhead in your formations? My only thing is you called it arrowhead. It's more of a junk. The only difference being, arrowhead, there's a person mark behind the arrowhead formation. That's the only difference. That's what I wanted to clarify.
Okay. Sorry, can you come back again?
Yeah, so this is a junk formation.
Okay.
The first 3 people are the arrowhead in the arrowhead formation. If the markers, the cutters are being marked person to person, then it is called an arrowhead defense. Otherwise, it's a junk. That's only clarification I wanted to do. Okay. Yeah. Thanks, Vijay.
Cool. Sounds good.
Yeah.
Vijay, I had one question.
Hey, Dada. Yes.
So you talked about looking at the larger picture. It's not like a hard and fast rule that this and this situation, this and this happens. So, and you mentioned that you can't ask people about what is the right way. You need to start need to start visualizing, considering these scenarios, right? So my question is, there are a lot of variations in the field, not variation, a lot of variants in the field. So there are, you look at people not having good throws, people not having that vision. So when all of these are there in the picture, how do you still start off with understanding the larger picture? So is it by communicating these things with your fellow mates? Like, for example, we talked about a scenario where a dump handler is coming upline, while also there is a cutter who can come into the upline space. Now, again, how do you understand the larger picture in this particular scenario? How do you start off visualizing such scenarios? Is
Uh,
is there a way?
I mean, there's no definite way for sure, but maybe you can start with a couple of common scenarios that you come across on the field. Let's say you're a handler, right? You probably understand certain elements on the field as to when you are engaged on the field. So maybe you can start from there, saying, okay, uh, once something you do something, whether that is the uh, best decision you could have taken. You could also talk to people, like you said. You definitely talking to people and understanding from them is one of it. uh, it this builds over time. I mean, let's understand this. Studying vision or studying awareness or getting a hang of it is ambiguous. It's definitely not step one, step two, and then you'll get step three. It's definitely not that. So you just have to, can you get into that mental frame of wanting to do better in that? Can you get, just imagine, if the same handler, right, if the same handler gets stuck on the sideline and wants to just prove a point, saying, okay, I know how to do a forehand. uh, it's about, instead of that, if you look earlier and maybe you can go towards the center and get the disc, right? That in itself is a kind of progress that you can do. It takes time. It takes time to even imagine something like this. But just understand one thing: even if you look at the best skilled players in Indian Ultimate, right now, quite often people who are not aware on the field, people who don't understand elements, but let us say they are really good skill. When I say the skill is good, let's assume we have a really fast runner, a runner who has good acceleration but just doesn't know what to do on the field, right? So that runner shows off his or her skill primarily through the skill. But if we imagine good players playing on the field, the first point that they take is awareness. They show off their skill through awareness. They know when they have to make the cut. They know when they have to do other things. So that's something that you necessarily just have to put that first step in, saying that I want something to happen. Now, if that leads you to reading books, that leads you to talking to fellow teammates, that leads you to coming out on the sideline and practicing a few things, imagining a few things, great. I mean, that's how you begin, right? So it's really very individual. The way I would learn is very different from the way you would learn, but it's possible that both of us move in that direction. And it only starts with saying, yes, I want to move in that direction, and you're not afraid to make a mistake. Quite often we get stuck saying, what will people in the team say? I don't want to. It's a common human tendency that you don't want to be the first to make a mistake. You always want someone else to make the mistake, so that you can blame it on them, right? So if you come out of something like that, then it's definitely possible where you start learning. But you maybe not being stubborn about things and open to learning might be a good beginning.
Vijay, just to add to that, to Datta's question, I think one of the things that like Vijay said, I don't think there might be hard and fast rules of teaching this particular topic. But one thing that I have noticed and has helped me in my game is observing people. And a couple of things that I've learned from Doctor, especially in our team. I still feel that he's one of the best players who's got amazing awareness. On defense, for example, the further he's away from the disc, if you've noticed in any game or any recording, he not only has the awareness of the stall count, he also you will also find him available for a bid the further he's away from the disc, and that's because he knows his position. Okay, he knows where he's marking his offense, and he then also starts taking time out to see what's happening over and above the other positions in the field. So and the closer he is to the disc, he does the fundamentals right, which is not to allow break, not to allow the undercut, whatever. So things like this. And on offense, I feel it's a combination of skills. If you have a teammate who, like Vijay said, can run fast, but also has the capability of understanding, then as a handler, it gives you the confidence that, I can pass it to that person, like, at a higher stall count, or I can reset it at any given point in time. But I think watching games really, and players really helps to begin with.
Great. Thanks, Gaurav. So we'll close the session here. We will continue this topic. There will be a number of other topics on similar lines that we will do going ahead. So thank you everyone for joining, and look forward to our next session. Thank you.